So next question would be, can you give us some reasons why the Old Testament books aren't historically reliable? Like why why we can't take Genesis and all that as to be historical fact? Bob, you first, and then Richard.
Well, the thing that, a lot of stuff like Adam and Eve is so obviously symbolic. I remember Clark Pinnock, an evangelical theologian, said, when you got a story and the main character his name means man, you gotta wonder if this is even, if anybody ever thought in the ancient world that this was literally true. But there's so much of it, even in the so-called Deuteronomic history, the stuff between Joshua and 2 Kings, that seems to be in the real world with wars of conquest and all kinds of things. A lot of that is novelistic. The descriptions focus on scenes of characters saying this to one another and doing that to one another, not the kind of thing that anybody records in history. It's all fiction writing. I mean, how would the writer have known exactly what David said to his wife while Saul's goons were hunting for him and all that? How would that survive? I like what Gunkel said about the stories of Abraham and Sarah. He says, look, according to the Bible, the Israelites are in Egypt for 4 centuries, and we hear nothing about it. But somehow, in the days before that, they remembered exactly what Abraham and Sarah said to each other having arguments. That's absurd. But then later on, when you get to stuff that does sound like there's some history to it, with the kings of Israel and Judah, Jehoshaphat and Ahab and all these people. And by the way, it never says anything about jumping with Jehoshaphat. This stuff is also novelistic, and but the thing that really kills it is the archaeological problem. You always hear from apologists who are totally out of date on this, that the Bible is backed up by archaeological discovery. Now, that's like what Constantine's mother did, sending researchers to the Middle East to find the true cross and the true tomb and the spear of Longinus and stuff. They found the tomb, it's Jesus' tomb. Let's pin the tail on the archaeological site. That's what these guys like William F. Albright did. They were trying to find stuff. Oh, city near the Dead Sea, must be Sodom, and so forth. Once you actually did strict archaeology like Thomas L. Thompson and others have done, it just falls apart. Like there's no evidence of a Temple of Solomon. What happened to it? I mean, did God send angels with vacuum cleaners down to get all the ruins of it up? I mean, they say, oh, we found a little pomegranate-shaped nodule that had been on top of a fence post or something in the temple. That's all? I mean, isn't that sort of the exception that proves the rule? What happened to the rest of it? It's on a level with saying Satan planted dinosaur bones to throw us off the track. And there weren't enough people in the area of Judea to have a monarchy there. There's no evidence that there ever was a Judean monarchy until like the time of the Hasmoneans. There was an Israelite monarchy in the north, but it never had anything to do with Judah in the south, which was more of a kind of distribution network for olive oil that was a major product down there. And so it's like King Arthur and Camelot and Avalon and all of that. There would have to be evidence, or the Exodus. Pick any hypothetical route you want from Egypt across the Sinai. There are about 3 major theoretical ones. What happened here? Millions of people and huge herds of cattle supposedly crossed the Sinai desert, which the Bible describes as a howling waste. How'd they feed anybody? And where is any evidence of this? I mean, we have infrared photography that can uncover ancient caravan routes on the Sinai Peninsula, and nothing anywhere that would match the Exodus. It just didn't happen, because again, you gotta come up with the angels with the vacuum cleaners. It's like they're vacuuming up the ticker tape parade or something. There's just no evidence where there would have to be evidence. And so the whole thing appears to be a kind of a national epic. And great stuff, I love it, but it's not history.
Richard?
It's the Jewish Homer, right? So,
Yeah.
like, you can say, well, we found a city in Troy that was burned down roughly around the time when the Trojan War was said to have happened, but that doesn't mean anything written in Homer is actually what happened. Especially since we know, like, Homer, for example, if you read the Iliad, there are random scenes mixed in and out of these characters interacting throughout the course of the book, in which, in one part, they're actually using iron weapons and wearing iron armor, and then another using bronze weapons wearing bronze armor. So Homer was written over so many centuries that it literally went from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. So clearly this all didn't happen at the same time, right? This is a story, there was no Homer who sat down and wrote this down. There may have been a Homer who was the last compiler who wrote down a bardic song that was passed on to him, but that song was written and added to over centuries and centuries, and it's just all mythical stuff that they made up to tell stories, and there's no evidence that any of it is really true. And so it's the same thing with the Bible. There might be little pieces of historical data, like the name David may have been a warlord at some point, or some tribal chief or something. They hang an entire, they say, well, we'll pick that, we're gonna create a whole narrative around this guy. And the reason we know this is plausible is because they kept doing it. There's this thing, a lot of people don't know this, in the 1st century AD, there's this book called the Biblical Antiquities that some bunch of Jewish writers wrote. And they picked all these minor characters in the Bible that hardly have any stories about them, and then it fleshed out entire stories for them. And suddenly they have magical knowledge of this in the 1st century AD. It's like, oh, so-and-so, we're going to write a whole narrative about this. And they wrote whole lives of Moses that expanded on the story of Moses. And so they kept doing these things. They would pick like one little thing and write a whole thing about it. And it's funny because like today we would call that fan fiction. My favorite fan fiction is Enoch, right? So there's one line in Genesis where it says, and then the Watchers came down from outer space and had sex with women, and then there were these weird creatures, the Nephilim. And then it moves on. This is one line, and it moves on, and then moving on, and then any normal reader that's like, whoa, hold on, what? And so someone picked that line and invented an entire book of the Bible to spell it out. So what does that mean? And they told this whole story about these angels having sex with women and teaching them sorcery, and that's how sorcery got into the world.
And cosmetics.
And cosmetics, yes, sorcery and cosmetics. And science, incidentally. So all these evil things. And so someone did this whole fan fiction thing, created the Book of Enoch, and Christianity was using, when the first Christians started, they were using the Book of Enoch as scripture. It was part of their holy scripture. A lot of their religion is built out of the ideas and concepts in the Book of Enoch. So, and that's not in our Old Testament. We forget that. We think like the Christians were only using the Old Testament as we have it today, and that's not the case. Their collection of scriptures were weirder and different and broader.
And there still is in Ethiopia. They have the much bigger canon that has several of the apostolic fathers, Enoch, and all kinds of stuff, and that's the Bible. Still, 3rd Corinthians is part of the canon of the Armenian Orthodox Church. So what is the Bible?
Yeah.
Okay.